We also would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and their leaders, past, present and emerging. We are Skew, the Wildlife Preservation Society of Queensland, Sunshine Coast and Hinterland branch. And our branch has been around since 1963. We're not the only ones hiding our purpose under a funny name or an acronym. Look at the string of other community environment groups, the ERGs and beepers and TAPs and Night Eyes and prickers, not to mention the ICMs, EPPs, PPCAPs, of government-issued papers, outcome reports, task forces, policies, legislation and strategies. Do we not now have enough acronyms to allow public servants and their willing community volunteers to get on with their jobs and achieve genuine environmental sustainability and limits to population in the Pumicestone Passage and its catchment, and meet our international obligations under the Convention on Wetlands of International Importance, widely known as Ramsar, after the Iranian city where it was signed, and which, unlike most of the other names, is not an acronym after all, although a lot of people have thought it is. Forgive this note of impatience, but it isn't new. Skew founder Kathleen MacArthur, self-educated advocate for the natural environment and always open to the science, adept at digesting and interpreting information for the benefit of others, she felt it too. We may know now that public consultation is ubiquitous and mandatory in government dealings with its constituents, but in 1993, when the Queensland government expressed a desire to foster a sense of ownership and stewardship within the local and wider community on release of its draft integrated management strategy for Pumicestone Passage, its catchment and Bribie Island, Kathleen's response was telling.
The community of Pumicestone Passage, catchment and Bribie Island has long been aware of the environment in which it lives, ably demonstrated by past campaigns to protect the area from the sustainable development the strategists deafen us with, such as a kraft paper pulp mill, a coal port, a nuclear plant, proposed breakwaters on the Caloundra Bar, with a Polynesian village with a mega marina on dredge sand from the bream spawning area, all of which were supported by the local authorities, chambers of commerce, ministers of the Crown, members of the Legislative Assembly and others.
During the 70s, 80s and 90s, Kathleen MacArthur was one of a group of driven individuals working within community groups who capitalised on their intelligence and farsightedness and ability to communicate. They brought science to their group members and the wider community and reached out to government. In 1985, Moffat Beach resident Betty Perez convened a meeting of an ad hoc environmental group committee, later the Pumicestone Passage Research Committee, and finally, a significant acronym, ERG, for the Estuarine Research Group. At that meeting, local historian and then Sunshine Coast Environment Council, SCEC, coordinator Stan Tutt, put a resolution to form an Institute of Estuarine Zone Research to be set up by covering in particular the area from the estuary of the Noosa River to the mouth of the Tweed River as defined by the Coordinator General's Coastal Management Report of 1975. Carried unanimously, the resolution was forwarded to other environmental groups for discussion and support. The outcome of this bold vision was the establishment in 1989 of an estuarine research centre at the Ex-Forestry Biawar Field Study Centre, run by ERG and headed up by Dr. John Shuttleworth and the later Jan Oliver. Kicking off the work that year was the hosting of a seminar of City Council and community wildlife and environmental group representatives on threats from future development in the Pumicestone Passage catchment.
In the meantime, the honorary secretary, I should say, Betty Perez, organised educational boat and coach trips up and down, got it there, up and down the Pumicestone Passage and across its catchment. Love boat cruises, followed by a smorgasbord lunch and a complimentary glass of wine, triggered a cross-fertilisation of ideas among community members, wetland experts, historians and politicians.
And coming back to Skew,
I believe one letter is worth 1,000 people jumping up and down and making a noise.
these are, of course, the words of Jill Chamberlain, OAM, Honorary Senior Fellow of the University of the Sunshine Coast, Honorary Life Member of SCEC, and presenter on migratory shorebirds later at today's Convergence. Jill has been Whipskew's letter writer extraordinaire for over 28 years, matching her fine-tooth combing of development applications with a skilled grasp of legislation and working in mutual respect with public servants, developers, and state and local politicians alike. Perhaps not so with one Minister for Transport, who raised Jill's ire sufficiently for her to pen a letter to the Courier Mail in August 1994.
My letter, as you will see, concerns the handling of the public input to an impact assessment study prepared by Cardno and Davies, Queensland Proprietary Limited, for Tees Contractors Proprietary Limited on the Bells Creek Arterial Road. This road is a proposed privately funded toll road joining the Bruce Highway to Caloundra here on the Sunshine Coast. The reply from the Minister is a form letter concerning the southeast tollway between Brisbane and the Gold Coast. My letter cannot have been read. It looks as though they saw the words arterial road and went into automatic defence mode. So much for community consultation. Yours faithfully, etc.
Individual public servants also played a role in inspiring cooperation among landholders, government and other parties interested in the passage and its catchment. Dr. Peter Oliver came from the Department of Primary Industries and took charge of a dynamic acronym, PRCCA, the Pumicestone Region Catchment Coordination Association, incorporated in 1997 as an integrated catchment management, ICM, group, sustaining both people and nature now and in the future. In 2010, the development proposal for a new city at Caloundra South galvanised many in defence of the passage. TAP, our next acronym, is Take Action for Pumicestone Passage, established under the initial leadership of Dawn Wilson and then Ken Newburn, this year a newly minted OAM for his service to conservation and the environment. A decade on, TAP is restoring mangroves to protect foreshores at Golden Beach. Its work an example of new thinking in community environmental advocacy and government and commercial responsibility. Under the independent banner of Healthy Land and Water, 3 levels of government and government grant funding support TAP, Night Eyes, Water and Land Care Association, the Bunya Bunya Country Aboriginal Corporation, the T.S. Onslow Australian Navy Cadets, and the Caloundra Powerboat Club in soft engineering solutions for a state-owned reserve. All these forces combined now have to convince visitors in the newly planted areas not to pull out the mangroves. At the time of the approval of the Caloundra South development, seen as an existential threat to the Pumicestone Passage, we can forgive the note of scepticism that crept into a website piece by our umbrella acronym SCEC.
Although we have an excellent legislative framework in place for the protection of water quality in the Pumicestone Passage, and although we have known for over 20 years that the impacts of current land use and management is unsustainable, and although we have a world's best practice monitoring regime, the experience since 1993 shows that all we are doing is monitoring ecological decline with an ever greater level of sophistication.
SCEC, this excellent acronym, has, however, brought together community groups to be members of the Caloundra South Community Stakeholder Reference Group, facilitated by Healthy Land and Water. Both groups, fortunately not easily acronymized, and focuses on developer compliance with approval conditions. TAP is a member of this reference group, and so is Skew, along with its Fauna Watch arm, as is Night Eyes. For, as Elaine Green has it, Elaine had the role of stakeholder liaison in an earlier iteration of Healthy Land and Water and is also an honorary life member of SCEC.
These days, developers must be the allies, and it is the job of the community to ensure that the environmental impacts of development are minimised on the ground and not only on paper.
So, have we moved on from the era of exasperated community groups and their redoubtable leaders beavering away at the try-ons of developers and government? We hope so. But in some form or another, it looks like the acronyms are here to stay. Thank you.
So we do have a question. Does anyone believe that the current housing developments in progress in the lower catchment for the Palmerston will deal with the water flows well enough to prevent damage?
All I can say is there are a lot of people a lot better qualified to answer that question. Conditions have been imposed on the development, which are certainly in advance on what's happened in earlier cases, but it remains to be seen for how long they're properly maintained.